We're here, it's the second day of the Garn Press Author Celebration. We're in Manhattan, and we have just come from a session where all our authors have been talking about publishing and getting their books to readers, which has been quite a formidable, do you think?
I think it's very different than I imagined, because
yes.
I just thought you write a book and then magic happens, but it's a lot of work.
And in that session, I said to you, at the end, we gave you the last word, and I asked, because you had not said anything during that entire hour and a half.
I hadn't.
No, and I was watching your face, and so I asked you to have the last word. Do you want to start there with your thoughts on publishing in this new period where social media has become so important?
Well, I thought that it seemed that it's time that I become more active in social media, because I'm not. In fact, I still called it facelift instead of Facebook, and I didn't realize, and I think that's kind of true, because you do give yourself a facelift in social media, and I think that it's going to be important for me to learn more about it and to be active in it. I'm, as someone in the room suggested, I'm sort of shy and not very self-promoting, and this is shameless self-promotion that I want to initiate, and then hopefully some readers who love the book will take over, and we'll have a little bit of a viral sensation to it where it takes on its own life.
So the book is your first novel. It's written for 4th grade, 5th grade, but it's a book that could be read by a grandparent for their own pleasure.
Yeah.
It is a book for everybody, and not age specific.
That's very
And it's called Flush, the exaggerated memoir of a 4th grade scaredy cat superhero. I think it's the most fabulous title.
Thank you.
So talk about it and writing.
Let me talk. That would be great. I'd love to talk about it. This book started many years ago, and it actually started when I was watching a movie. And the movie was A River Runs Through It, which a lot of people know and love and remember. I remember nothing about the book, because the first bit where the narrator comes on, I played over and over until I wrote it down. And it's this. You hear the narrator say, "Norman, you like to write, don't you?" And I said, "Oh, sorry, let me back up." It starts, "One day my father said to me, 'Norman, you like to write, don't you?' And I said, 'Yes, I do.' And my father said, 'Someday you'll write the story of our family. Only then will you understand what happened and why.'"
It's profound.
And it is. That's why I kept rewinding it and playing it over and over again. And this book is about what happened and why. And it's a very thin slice of a 9-year-old's life. It's when I, pretty much me, exaggerated to some degree, because everything I remember is. But it's a slice of my life in the summer of 4th grade. I'd had a fantastic teacher who, I hated school before then, but I had a fantastic 4th grade teacher who taught us to be curious and to follow our curiosity, and so I spent the summer doing that. But in the midst of all that, there was my intense relationship with my father, which was like living on the side of a volcano. Sometimes it was a great place to plant things and they grow in that rich soil, and other times you better run because the ground is shaking. So there's my father in there, my mother, my 2 sisters, and some of our adventures. It was a summer when I was bullied, and so much happened in that summer. And to me, I can see it as such a thick, dense root of my identity and what I manifest to the world.
One of the things that I think was remarkable is the way in which you managed to portray the endless time of that summer. You're not programmed, you're not going to camp, you're not going to whatever it is, that soccer camp or whatever camp that children go to these days, and so the time was actually yours, and it's out of that, in that space, that this entire book takes place, without adults telling you where you need to be at a particular time, or you being accountable in that way. I'm kind of putting it into the words in your mouth, but you're accountable for yourself, and that's really true. What that book is.
Yeah. That summer and many summers of my childhood, both of my parents had to work for us, as they called it, to make ends meet, and they just left us, and there was no warning and no rules, just don't get into trouble. And the neighborhood had a lot of adults around, mostly women. They watched each other, they watched each other's kids, but a lot of kids in those summers did go to summer camps, and they went to sleepaway camps, not a week of soccer and you're home every evening, but they were gone for 6 or 8 weeks. And for me, it was my bicycle, my freedom, and a 9-year-old whizzing through the neighborhood on his bicycle, and eventually collecting junk that people left by their curb, and doing imaginary and fantastic things with that junk, building robots and collecting all sorts of collectibles that eventually wound up in the trash. But the freedom that it provided me was
priceless.
It was, and in such sharp contrast to most of my years in school, when I just felt like I was in a straitjacket. There's a part of me that's not very apparent in the book, because that part of me occurs in school, and this was about the summer, but I am phenomenally shy. I am so shy that I never went to the bathroom in school, and I would run home at the end of a day, and we lived about a quarter of a mile from school, to use the bathroom. And yet in the summer, I wasn't afraid to do anything. I was fearless. And so that was the superhero part. The scaredy cat part is because of bullies and bigger kids in the neighborhood and feeling threatened, and even some anti-Semitism that I experienced. So
you shared last night the story of going fishing. Can you talk about it a little bit?
Yes. There were these forbidden ponds about 2 miles from our house, and forbidden because they were along a very busy, narrow street. And these were streets that you do not ride a bicycle on. And one day in my adventure, I found myself near these ponds. And so I crossed the busy street, rode along the shoulder, and pretty much fell into the land just around the pond, the kind of mushy, mucky stuff. And I was just sitting there, and all of a sudden I saw a flash of gold in the water. And after a while, I realized I had a sandwich with me, and I was throwing little bits of bread in the water, and these little not so little goldfish, they were really carp, were coming to the surface. Well, a few days later, not so much of a friend, but a bully of mine told me that I was going fishing with him, and we wound up at this same place. And he ultimately caught one of the goldfish, and I protested, and I pleaded, throw it back, throw it back, throw it back, and of course he didn't, and I wound up under him as he was sitting over me, pushing my back into the mud, telling me he wasn't throwing it back. And I couldn't tell him that it was something beautiful, because boys didn't do that. And I was learning from my father and other boys what boys were supposed to do. And much of my life, within my thoughts and eventually my actions, I stood in stark contrast to what a boy was supposed to be. And I was overly sensitive as a boy. I cried very easily, which made my father absolutely enraged that a young man would be so emotional. And to me, the importance of remembering that goldfish story is, if you remember a story, it's teaching you all the time. And I don't want to sound too much like the Lorax, but I sort of speak for the goldfish now, whether it's children and school policies and crazy things happening politically. But even as a shy person, I speak out, and People say to me, "You were so angry," and I say, "How do you know?" "Well, you were so red in the face." It's like, that's because I'm so embarrassed. It's so hard for me to speak out, but I cannot keep quiet. I'm just not physically capable of it anymore. It's part of my DNA.
If you could give one recommendation to parents for the summer, for summers, what would it be? For whether it's a 9-year-old boy or a 9-year-old girl, thinking
Yes.
about your own sisters as well as yourself,
Yes.
what would you wish for them?
My biggest wish for the parents is listen before any decisions are made. Listen to who your child really is. And I told my son-in-law that about my granddaughter who's 3, because he's planning for her to learn how to code on a computer and all this stuff. And I said, you better listen to her or you're going to make yourself and her miserable. Listen to who she is and let her identity and your good listening lead to decisions that support who she is and what she wants to become.
That's very good advice. And in school, it's almost the same advice.
Yes, for teachers, absolutely, because kids' curiosity will come up, and if we follow that, we'll teach everything. All the silly standards and goals that are thousands of pages and lines long now that we don't need. We can narrow them down to the hugeness of a kid's curiosity.
So one wish for teachers and children in public schools?
The wish is to pursue that curiosity, have it be a place to cultivate curious minds, inquiry, questions, and justice. The world is not a just place, and we have to work with kids to cultivate peace, the way Esther Fine talks about peace, and decency towards each other.
And that's what your book does. Am I right?
I feel like it tries to be part of that conversation.
It is part of that conversation. It's an extraordinary book.
Thank you.